In this video, I'll be going over the worst habits you can have as a trader. I'll be ranking them all the way from you're cooked down to probably okay for now. And I won't just be going over the basic habits such as overtrading or revenge trading, but rather I'll actually be talking about the specific mindsets which prevented me from being profitable. My name is Francis Akawili. I've been trading for nearly 5 years. I've passed over 30 evaluations, and I also had 3 of my accounts be moved to live. All the proof is in my YouTube as well as my Instagram, which I'll link down below. And as a bonus, at the very end, I'll be inverting all 8 habits so that you can find out what a profitable trader does instead. So the very first habit I'll be talking about is not being specialized. This is especially true in the beginning stages. If you are someone who hasn't yet found an asset class that you enjoy trading, or you don't know what time frame you would like to trade on, then yes, it is important that you will be experimenting with different styles. However, once you found one that works with your personality, I think it's highly suggested that you specialize in one specific market. Get to learn it, because once you do, you won't have to think too much about entering and exiting trades. Especially when you aren't yet profitable, there's probably going to be a lot of things that you're focusing on. So if you can at least streamline the process of getting in and out of trades, then you give yourself the best chance for profitability, just because it's a lot easier to execute. Now, of course, if you look up really advanced traders, they'll say that they trade a bunch of different markets. However, that's usually at a point where they are more so trying to extrapolate their edge. But in order for them to have found their edge, they usually specialized in one specific arena first. So assuming that you aren't yet profitable, I'm going to rank not being specialized in skating on thin ice, just because it won't kill you right away. However, it can delay how quick you can become profitable. The next one is believing in the fantasy of a holy grail. Profitability in trading, I like to look at it as an iceberg. You want to stack as much layers of good habits as possible. However, all of that is going to be beneath the surface. It's only once you get that final stack that you'll actually see it above the water. Therefore, there never is going to be one specific thing which will solve all of your problems. And I also highly suggest that you get out of that mindset. And that's primarily because there's always going to be something to work on. Even if you've been trading for decades, there might be that one habit which completely messes you over. So it's always, again, something you're going to be working on. And even when you do fix old habits, when you're scaling and pushing yourself mentally, those bad habits might creep back in. It's up to you to have to go back to your systems and ultimately find what works so that you don't repeat the same mistakes. And it definitely is a habit which can keep you stuck, just because you're more likely to enter this cycle of frustration where you think one specific thing is going to solve it all, and then you get there. But once you get there, you realize that there's another thing. So ultimately, it just sets up a bunch of disappointment, and therefore you can get super frustrated and one day end up blowing everything. So it's not something that is the worst, I'll say. And to be honest, you'll probably be okay. However, I do suggest that you kind of rewire your thinking a bit. Probably okay for now. And the next habit I'll be ranking is fixating on an uncontrollable short-term outcome. So this could mean fixating a lot on a winning streak that you might have had. Again, you don't have control over that. It could be fixating on a losing streak as well, and just feeling so emotionally tied into the results. Yes, if there were things that you could have worked on, then you should be focusing on that. Like if your execution wasn't good during the drawdown, then focus on that. But if you're just purely focused on the fact that you lost money over and over again, then essentially you'll stay in this loop of never being able to execute to the best of your ability. Again, how can you actually perform when the only thing you're focused on is what happened yesterday or what happened a week ago? And I don't know about you, but whenever I notice myself fully fixated on something that I can't control, my performance goes down so much. So I am going to put this in skating on thin ice. I realized that I used the wrong image, so I'm gonna switch that. The next habit I'll be ranking is setting a deadline on profitability. If you're on YouTube, one of the most commonly asked questions is, how long will it take me to become profitable? Unlike university, where we know it's going to take 4 years, trading is something that varies individual by individual. And it's nice to know that you can become profitable within months or even a year or two. However, I noticed that when you do set that deadline, such as in 1 year, I am going to make $50,000, nothing goes right. I think it's just because it ties in with the previous point where you just become so fixated on the goal that you just can't execute in the present moment. And therefore, every little thing that happens to you, it'll feel like a personal attack. I like to think of this one quote that I thought of, which is, "It's difficult to maneuver the terrain of a mountain, when you're only fixated on the peak. And I feel as though this quote sums up the whole entire trading journey, where the only thing, at least in the beginning, that you can think of is how long will it take me to become profitable? And you want to fulfill that sense of certainty by setting a goal in the future. However, unlike university, where you know that once you complete this amount of credits, then you graduate with this degree, with trading, referencing back to the iceberg, there's just so many skills that you have to work on. And for each person, it might take them completely different time than someone else. So that's why it's best to not set a date for profitability, but rather a check-in. So instead, you want to set a date in the future and look at it from, once I get to that date, assess, did I actually improve over the course of, for example, 6 months? If the answer is no, then that means you have to change something. But if the answer is yes, and you actually have achieved your goal when it came to something like working on your risk management, then you can conclude that you're at least a better trader. So for setting deadlines for profitability, I'm going to put that in not ideal. The next unprofitable habit is going to be not having at least one other focus aside from trading. So if trading is the only thing you are doing, I guarantee you it will make the journey so much harder. If you look at top athletes or professionals around the world, for example, we'll take Stephen Curry, even though he is basically the GOAT of shooting, it's quite a well-known fact that he enjoys golf. I brought that up because when you're performing at the highest levels, it's always a great idea to have something else that you can at least fixate on aside from just that one single thing. So once you've closed up shop for the day and you're done trading, one of the worst things you can do is to continue thinking about what happened earlier in the day, especially when it's not productive thinking. Like if you're not actually thinking about the things that you could be doing better, but you're just fixated on results, then that is why having something that you can focus on aside from trading is going to be so helpful. And ideally, it's something that does require your conscious attention. So for me, at least, I found the gym to be really helpful, not only just from an exercise standpoint, but also because when I'm grinding sets, it's very rare for me to just be thinking about like, ah, damn, I lost $500. You know, like I'm pretty locked in when I am working out. So something like that just, again, takes your mind away from the charts. So for this habit, I will put it in not ideal. For a more basic habit, we're going to be going over risk management. Even if you have the craziest profitable strategy, let's say it's like 90% win rate and a 5-to-1 reward to risk ratio, crazy profitability. If your risk management is super bad and basically it's like you went to a casino and you're like double or nothing, right? Eventually, even though you have a 90% win rate, you're going to lose one, so you're basically wiped out. Because of this, I feel as though risk management has to be one of the things where you have to dial it down, at least for now, or at least be strategic with your risk management. I always like to think that I can always enter drawdown at any moment. And even though some may think of that as a pessimistic mindset, it quite truthfully keeps me from risking more than I should. So at least at the end of the day, I can still show up tomorrow and most importantly, prioritize survival. Therefore, if you have crazy risk management and you're risking like even 20% of your account per trade, eventually like the odds of you hitting that 5 losing streak, it's very high, especially when you're emotionally charged and you're not actually following your plan. So therefore, because it's so detrimental to your account and to your survivability and basically your long-term profitability, I am going to put poor risk management in your cooked. If you don't have a good risk management setup and you are interested in trading prop firms, I did make a video on how I passed 30 evaluations, which I'll leave linked in the description below. Go ahead and check that out after this video. As for the next habit I'll be talking about is not trading with a back-tested edge. In general, if you have psychological problems, the first thing you should do is make sure you actually back-tested your edge, because I swear so much of your problems will be solved just by knowing that your edge is profitable over a long-term period. If instead you're kind of just guessing where price is going to go, it's so easy to not actually have faith in the long term. However, you don't actually have to have a profitable edge or long-term profitable edge in order to trade prop firms. Therefore, unlike risk management, where if you risk too much at any time, you can blow yourself up, with a profitable edge, so long as your risk management is dialed, not only can you actually take out profits, but you're probably not gonna die like right away. As in, your account usually won't just be blown up, so you can still trade tomorrow. Now, yes, you are going to bleed out if you are trading a live account. However, at least as long as you can trade tomorrow, it's still something that you can work on. Therefore, I'm going to put this in skating on thin ice. It obviously is crucial for long-term success, especially if you're not just trying to trade prop firms, but instead you would like to build your own live account and make money over the long term. Then it is very important that you have a profitable edge. However, I won't say that it'll like immediately destroy you right away. The last habit I'll be talking about is minimal mental or emotional awareness. Now, this is one of the things where it can affect you on a micro and macro basis. By micro, I mean when you're trading, and by macro, I mean as a lifestyle. So when you are trading on the day-to-day basis, if you aren't aware of your emotions, you're basically done, because the only time that you are going to be aware of them is when you blow up, and when the emotional pain becomes too intense that you realize that you're not trading how you used to. And typically by then, your account's basically blown. As for macro basis, I think it's actually really, really important to be aware of your thoughts. So kind of referencing back to fixating on an uncontrollable thing, if you ended the day, even if it's green, let's say if I'm at the gym and I'm fixated on the fact that I was green for the day, I feel all good, I'm like really happy, then I notice that that transfers over into the next trading day on a really bad note. Just because I have this feeling of being invincible, so when I actually do lose a trade, I can enter this really bad snowball and eventually blow up my funded accounts. So if you aren't aware of your mental state, then this is one of the things where it can basically destroy your account right now, or at least inevitably destroy your account. So I feel as though this is actually one of the things that you really have to work on if you want to trade profitably over the long term. And as I promised, I'm going to now be going over the inverse very briefly. For believing that there is a holy grail, I'd say the inverse is treating trading as a series of mini skills that you have to work on. And not just that, but it's skills that you can continuously keep leveling up. Then and only then will you be able to peek over the waterline and basically become the iceberg. However, even with an iceberg, let's just assume we're like in an imaginary scenario, you can keep stacking the iceberg as high as you can and just reach further levels of profitability. As for setting a deadline, I kind of hinted at it already, but instead of setting a deadline such as I want to be profitable in the next 2 years, set a check-in. So in the next 3 months, I am going to check and see, did I improve in certain aspects that I wanted to work on previously? Aspects that are actually within my control. And if the answer is yes, and you're starting to see the profitability as a result, then that means that you're doing something well, and it doesn't have to tie in with just a uncontrollable goal such as I'm going to make X amount in 2 years or whatever. As for not having at least one other thing to focus on, I mean, the inverse is pretty simple. It's like find something that draws your attention and allows you to actually take a break from trading itself. So that could be in forms of exercise. Ideally, it's something that is kind of complementary to trading. So you can also be working a job on the side just to supplement your income with trading. Just something, again, that allows you to take a rest or take a break from the demanding psychological needs of trading itself. And the inverse of trading with a non-backtested edge, it just means to backtest your edge just so that you have a good sense of long-term confidence, and also so you get into the habit of making adjustments which are based on statistical data and not just how you feel. Next is fixating on a short-term uncontrollable outcome. For this inverse, we want to instead be building a process or list of the things which we know would contribute to long-term profitability. So for example, it's setting plans in place such as I am going to stop trading after 2 losses because I know that psychologically I get drained and I can't execute anymore. As long as you follow that plan, which is within your control, then I am moving towards my goal, and thus I am trading as a profitable trader. You essentially just want to have a plan that you can follow, and everything within the plan is something that you can actually work on yourself instead of having to rely on something such as, was I green for the day, or I was red last week. As for the inverse of not being specialized, it's going to be specializing in one specific market. Again, in the stages of becoming profitable, you want to focus in on one thing. It just makes everything so much simpler. And once you have built a track record of profitability and you have that confidence in yourself knowing that you can do it, then you can look to extrapolate that edge, maybe trade other markets or other times in the day. But for now, just focus on one specific market and at one specific time so you can give yourself the best odds to trade profitably. As for not trading with a sound risk management strategy, a profitable trader would prepare for the worst. So they would know their win rate They would know their worst losing streak, and they would also experiment with a lot of different other simulations just to get a gauge of what is the absolute worst case scenario and can I handle that drawdown in the event that it actually happens. Lastly, the inverse of not being aware of your emotions is having a good awareness of your psyche throughout the day and also on the charts. If you are someone who struggles with this specifically, the very first step that you can take is have a journal and write out your thoughts as they start to come in. You'll realize that you might only start writing down your emotions once things have already kind of snowballed. However, if you do practice this habit on a day-to-day basis, you'll be able to almost backtrack the series of events that had to take place. For example, the very first note you might write today will be, I blew up my account, I feel like shit. And the next day, it might be, I noticed myself almost get into a trade and that trade did work out and it became a winner and I got very emotional. And then the next day, it can be, I realized 30 minutes into market open that I was thinking about the past 2 losses that I took yesterday and the day before. So with this, you are reinforcing the habit of bringing that awareness to your mental state, because then and only then can you actually start doing something about it and you can actually focus on what you need to in the present moment. If you're a trader who hasn't yet found profitability and you haven't yet taken your first payout, or if you're simply someone who wants to continue scaling yet they struggle with certain things from an emotional standpoint, then message me a DM on Instagram. There are 5 slots left for 4 free weekly coaching calls. In each of those calls, we'll be able to track your progress on a week-to-week basis and lay out a game plan for how you can continue meeting your goals in trading.